3 years ago, the children I raised abandoned me in a cold rural town, calling me worthless. 3 years later, they returned with gifts, wine, and guilty smiles. My son lifted his glass and said, "Dad, we just want to make things right and help manage your assets safely." I looked at each of them, smiled, and said 5 words that froze the table. "You are already too late." They never knew I had been rebuilding everything and waiting for them to step into the trap. I'm deeply grateful to have you here for this journey. To help me get to know this community, please comment below which city or country are you watching from. I read every single response. Note, this story includes fictional elements for entertainment and educational purposes. Any link to actual people or places is accidental, but the core lesson I'm sharing is valuable. I raised my champagne glass in the warm amber light of Bellagio Trattoria and caught a 2-word reflection on the iPad screen my daughter-in-law had carelessly left on the table: power of attorney. My blood turned to ice, but my hand kept the glass steady. My smile stayed radiant. My voice stayed warm as I said, "You children are so thoughtful. Your father is a lucky man." Thaddeus Harrington, me 56 years old this year, hair-going silver hands that had once negotiated food security for 50,000 Afghan farmers as a USAID advisor, was now sitting at this Italian dinner table watching 4 of my children celebrate the fact that they were poisoning me. Bellagio Trattoria, Chicago, November 2021, $480 per person. A saxophone arrangement of Pavarotti drifted through the space. Amber light fell on white porcelain plates holding truffle mushroom risotto. The smell of butter and garlic filled the air. Moe flowed like water. I sat at the head of the table, 4 children arranged around me like judges celebrating a death sentence. Sterling Harrington, 32 years old. My eldest son wore a black Armani suit that couldn't conceal the shadows under his eyes, the kind of shadows that come from secretly losing $40 million and spending 3 sleepless months on Wall Street. He raised his glass. "Dad, health is what matters most. We've taken care of everything." Briar Harrington, 28 years old. My youngest daughter laughed brightly as she sipped her Moet. The world of Milan fashion PR she inhabited was so far removed from this dinner table that she had no idea her marriage was a $5 million contract. She said, "Dad, we found somewhere peaceful for you to rest. The mountains of Montana, clean air." Saskia Prescott, 30 years old. Sterling's wife with ice blue eyes and the precision of a New York attorney who had been disbarred, smiled warmly while her iPad glowed with the words, "power of attorney," reflecting in my champagne glass. She said, "Dad, we contacted the Mayo Clinic. They recommend somewhere with green space, low stress." Dane Castillo, 35 years old, sat with the posture of a Marine because he was exactly that. Iraq 2004 to 2008. Though tonight he was playing the role of a Soho gallery manager with $5 million in mercenary contract fees. He nodded, "Thaddeus, Montana is wonderful. Briar and I already went to scout it. There's a small log cabin near the village of Oak Haven." I let my hand tremble slightly as I raised my glass, pretending to tremble, then said, "You children are so thoughtful. I don't know what to say." Saskia patted my hand gently. "Dad, don't worry. We'll handle everything." I looked down at the iPad screen through the gap over Saskia's shoulder. The browser tab was still open: real estate lawyer, plus power of attorney Chicago. The screen was too bright. She had forgotten to close it. So, power of attorney. So these 4 weren't just trying to kill me. They wanted it to be legal. I took a sip of champagne. The sweetness still lingered on my tongue. Violin soft and gentle. I smiled at my 4 children. You don't forget a moment like that. Champagne still sweet on your tongue, violin still playing, and 2 words on a screen telling you that your own children are hunting you. The dinner ended at 10:30 in the evening. The 4 of them drove me back to the Chicago apartment, hugged me, said, "Get some rest, Dad," and left. I stood at the window and watched Sterling's Mercedes S-Class disappear into the November Chicago night. I waited 10 minutes. Then I walked into the living room, turned on the amber desk lamp, and opened the filing cabinet drawer that Saskia had forgotten to lock the week before. Inside, an 18-page medical file. Doctor's name, Dr. Vernon Yates. Diagnosis: early-stage Alzheimer's disease, plus stage 2 lung cancer. I read every line. My hands trembled this time for real. Patient Thaddeus Harrington, 56 rapid memory deterioration over the past 6 months. Recommendation medical guardianship, restricted exposure to complex environments, family oversight of finances required. I whispered, early stage Alzheimer's, guess memory deterioration. Vernon, you didn't write this file for me. I set the file down. I tested myself. Solanum lycopersicum, Triticum aestivum, Oryza sativa, Zea mays, Glycine max. I named 50 plant species in Latin. No hesitation, no forgetting. The Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, pi 3.141592653979323846. My memory was perfect. This medical file was a forgery. How long had they been planning this? 6 months, a year, since Lorraine died, I picked up my phone and photographed every page. Page 1, Alzheimer's diagnosis. Page 2, lung cancer. Page 3, guardianship recommendation. Pages 4 through 18, fabricated blood tests. Fabricated CT scans, Vernon Yates' signature on every page. 18 pages. I photographed all of them, encrypted, backed up to 3 clouds, Google Drive, Dropbox, iCloud. My hands were still trembling when I typed the passwords. Sterling, my eldest son, whom I raised from 8 weeks old. Briar, my youngest daughter, whom I taught to ride a bicycle when she was 6. Saskia, my daughter-in-law, whom I loved like a daughter of my own. Dane, my son-in-law, who always politely called me Thaddeus rather than Dad. These 4 people were trying to kill me by legal means. I folded the medical file, placed it back in the drawer, in exactly the position I had found it. 18 pages had been photographed, encrypted, and backed up to 3 clouds. The game had rules now. They just didn't know I had read the rules first. In 3 days, I would discover what they had been putting into the restorative supplement Sterling had been sending me. 3 days after the Bellagio dinner, I locked my Chicago office door, placed the amber glass bottle of Sterling's restorative supplement on the testing table, and switched on the Hotch DR 890 mercury analyzer I had used in Kabul 20 years before. My office was still stocked with equipment from my USAID days, a lead test kit, the Hotch DR 890 mercury analyzer, a field water filtration unit, all of it from Afghanistan 2001 to 2008, from when I was helping 50,000 farmers test their water sources for heavy metal contamination. Now, I was using them to test exactly how my own son was poisoning his father. I removed the cap from the supplement bottle. A faint chemical smell drifted out, not the natural herbal scent Sterling had described. I poured 5 milliliters into a test tube, added reagent, shook it evenly. The lead test kit lit up red after 30 seconds. 0.4 parts per million. Lead. FDA, limit 0.05 parts per million. I fed the second sample into the Hotch DR 890. The old LCD screen blinked with green digits. 0.08 parts per million. Mercury. FDA, limit 0.005 parts per million. I sat down in my chair and stared at the 2 numbers. Lead exceeding the limit by 8 times. Mercury exceeding it by 16. An average of 12 times over the allowable dose. Enough to cause confusion, hand tremors, and memory deterioration over 6 months. Enough to turn a father into an early-stage Alzheimer's patient. Enough to justify a power of attorney. I whispered, lead 0.4, mercury 0.08, 12 times over the limit. Sterling, have you been giving me this for 6 months? I stood, picked up the supplement bottle, and walked to the carnation plant by the window. I poured all 250 milliliters into the soil. The carnations would die in 3 days, but at least they would die in my place. I rinsed the bottle clean, filled it with distilled water, and screwed the cap back on carefully. I checked the seal. Perfect. If they wanted me weak, I would be weak in exactly the way they expected. I placed the fake supplement bottle back on the shelf. I poured 10 milliliters of the real supplement into a small glass vial, labeled it Sample November 2021. Upextast Otas and Toris, and stored it in the safe. Evidence. I whispered to the fake supplement bottle, Sterling, your supplement will keep arriving. I'll keep pretending to take it, and you'll keep believing your father is dying. zero point 0.4 parts per million. That was the number that could turn a father into a problem to be eliminated. 2 weeks later, December 2021, snow falling lightly outside the Chicago apartment window. The doorbell rang at 2 in the afternoon. Sterling and Saskia. I opened the door, hand trembling slightly, pretending to tremble, and smiled weakly. "You two are here." Saskia hugged me. "Dad, we have good news." We sat in the living room. Sterling opened a travel folder containing photos of a small log cabin surrounded by pine trees. Sterling said, "Dad, we've rented this cabin in Oak Haven, Georgia. 6 months, green space, clean air, you'll recover." Saskia added, "Good Wi-Fi. Dad can work remotely if he wants. The cabin belongs to Grandfather Robert's family. We still hold the ownership rights." I looked at the photo of the cabin. Old wood, single story. 100-year-old oak tree blocking half the entrance like a warning, mountains in the background. I said slowly in a weak voice, Let me spend 6 months and see. If I recover, I'll come back." Sterling smiled slightly. "Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of the family assets." Take care of the family assets? I knew exactly what that phrase meant. Saskia said, "We've arranged everything already. Dad just needs to pack warm clothes. January gets a lot of snow in Georgia." I nodded slowly. "Thank you, children. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sterling stood, clapped me on the shoulder. "Get some rest, Dad. We'll handle it." They left at 4 in the afternoon. I stood at the window and watched the Mercedes S-Class disappear into the light Chicago snow. They thought a man who had once negotiated with Afghan warlords and Iraqi government officials couldn't recognize a trap when his own son was laying it. I waited 10 minutes. Then I opened my laptop. Signal, end-to-end encrypted message. I typed a name I hadn't used in 13 years, Wyatt Floyd Weaver. Floyd Weaver, former FBI and old friend from Afghanistan, 2001 to 2008, a man who had helped me investigate the Kabul food corruption network. Floyd had since retired to rural Georgia, working as a private attorney. I typed 6 words, "Wyatt, I'm coming. They opened my game. Sent." 2 minutes later, Floyd replied, "Thaddeus, 13 years. What do you need?" I typed 6 months, Oak Haven, evidence, war. Floyd, "I'm 2 hours from Oak Haven. When do you arrive?" Me, January 5th, 2022. Floyd, "I'll be ready. What are we fighting?" I looked at the screen thinking of Sterling Saskia Breyer Dane, thinking of the power of attorney, thinking of the supplement bottle containing lead and mercury, thinking of the 18-page forged medical file. I typed, "My children." Floyd didn't respond immediately. 30 seconds later, "Jesus, I'm sorry, Thaddeus. I'll help. Bring evidence." Me. 3 clouds, encrypted, metal analysis, photos, ready. Floyd, "See you January 5th, be careful." I closed the laptop, stood up, went to the wardrobe, opened the bottom drawer. Inside the metal analysis kit, the photographed medical file, the small glass vial containing the original supplement sample. Evidence for a war they didn't know had already begun. I closed the drawer. 6 weeks from now, I would drive my Range Rover into frozen Oak Haven, Georgia, to a grandfather's cabin I had never seen, and onto a chessboard that stretched 4 years into the future. But today, I only needed to pretend to be weak. And wait. 6 weeks passed like 6 minutes. On January 5th, 2022, the Range Rover's headlights cut through gray Georgia fog at 4:47 in the afternoon, and I saw the ancestral cabin my children had sent me to die in, paint-peeling gray. The front step cracked clean into 100-year-old oak tree obscuring half the entrance like a final warning. 2 hours and 12 minutes from Atlanta. 118 miles. Temperature -2 degrees Celsius. I killed the engine, sat still in the car for 2 minutes, looking at the house my grandfather Robert had left behind. 5 rooms, kitchen living room, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Built in 1978. 44 years old. Paint peeling gray like the skin of a cancer patient. Warped wooden window frames. A long crack running down the brick chimney. I stepped out of the car. Cold wind cut into my face like a blade. My breath turned white vapor. I walked up the front step. The wood groaned. The crack ran from left to right an inch deep. I opened the door. The smell of dust and mice floated out. I flicked the light switch. A pale yellow bulb. Living room, one old leather sofa, one wooden table, one brick fireplace. Kitchen, an old gas stove, but still functional. A small refrigerator hummed when I plugged it in. Bathroom, toilet, sink, bathtub, but no hot water. I checked the water heater. Broken, completely broken. I called the plumber's number, posted on a flyer stuck to the refrigerator. A man's voice answered, "Georgia Plumbing, Todd speaking." I said, "The water heater is broken. Need it fixed urgently. Temperature -2. Todd, address me, 1247 Oak Ridge Road, Oak Haven." Todd, Robert Harrington's old place. Yeah, that heater died in 2019. Quote, $1,850. But we're booked until July 9th. 6 months wait. Me, July 6 months. Todd, small town, sir. One plumber. Winter's busy. Sorry. Me, understood. Thank you. I hung up, looked around the cabin. 6 months without hot water. No heating except the wood fireplace. Temperature -2 degrees. Sterling had a Manhattan penthouse with heated marble bathroom floors. I had a working toilet and a sink. This was what I looked like in their eyes, a man of no further value. $1,850. July 9th. They knew I was coming in January with no heat, no hot water. This wasn't a gift. This was the grave they hoped I would dig myself in, 6 months of isolation, and the fake supplements designed to erode my mind. I went outside. I cut fallen oak branches with the small saw in the Range Rover's trunk. 30 minutes of work yielded enough wood for one night. Cold sweat on my back in the -2 wind. I whispered to the cold air. I negotiated food security for 50,000 Afghan farmers. I can survive one Georgia winter in my grandfather's house. I carried the wood inside, stacked it in the fireplace, lit it with matches from the glove compartment box. The fire caught. Warmth spread. By 8 in the evening, the outside temperature had dropped to a genuine -2. Inside the cabin, 4 degrees Celsius. I boiled water on the gas stove, poured it into the bathtub, 4 inches of warm water. I soaked my feet for 5 minutes, enough to prevent frostbite. I couldn't sleep. Too cold. I sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket and opened the manila folder Sterling had handed me in November 2021. Inside the 6-month cabin rental contract instructions for the gas stove, the plumber's phone number, which I had just called, and a handwritten note, "Dad, get some rest. We love you." I folded the folder closed, looked around the living room. The fireplace was a small sun in a frozen universe, 4 walls, 1 old man, and a conspiracy 118 miles away that thought distance meant safety. I stood up, went looking for more blankets, opened the living room closet, empty. Opened the table drawer, empty. Touched the back wall panel of the closet, it vibrated gently. I unscrewed the fitting. The panel was loose. I pulled it out. Inside the wall, cavity, 1 old folded blanket and a photograph. I pulled out the photo. Colors faded. A man of 62 standing in front of this same cabin. Silver hair, gray eyes, holding a notebook in his hand. Grandfather Robert. I brought the photo close to the firelight, looked carefully. His eyes were identical to mine. Not similar, identical. That strategic gaze looking into the camera, as if looking into the future, knowing something was coming. On the back of the photo, faint handwritten text, "For the one who survives. RH 1985. For the one who survives," I whispered. "Grandfather Robert, who were you waiting for? Your eyes look too much like mine." I looked at the photo again. Robert at 62 in 1985. Me at 56 in 2022. 6 more years, and I would be 62, the same age as he was in this photograph. He hid this photo in the wall, not forgotten, deliberately hidden. He knew someone would come. Someone would find it. Someone would need it. I sat down on the wooden floor in front of the fireplace, holding the photograph, looking into my grandfather's eyes across 37 years. "Did you know I would come? Did you leave this cabin for me, specifically, or for whichever grandson might survive being thrown away?" The fire glowed red. Wind howled outside, -2 degrees. I held the photograph up to the firelight. Grandfather Robert at 62. The same age I would be in 6 years, looking into the camera with that strategic gaze that had already seen something coming. The photo was deliberately hidden, not forgotten. Robert had waited 37 years for the right grandson to find it. The question wasn't whether Robert could see the future. The question was, what else had he left behind? 2 weeks from now, I would discover what he had been waiting for, and why oil companies had been circling this worthless land since 1995. 2 weeks after finding the photo, I sat across from a local attorney whose file contained one sentence that rewrote everything. Mineral rights transferred to Cresta Oil and Gas Corporation, effective June 12, 1995, 30 years, without extraction, without reclamation. Oak Haven Law Office, early February 2022. My second week in Georgia. Attorney Marcus Brennan, a local land specialist of about 55, who had the tired look of a man who had watched companies circle this land for decades, opened the file and said, "Mr. Harrington, your grandfather Robert sold the mineral rights in 1995. He kept surface ownership, but everything underground belongs to Cresta Oil." I asked, 1995. Marcus nodded. 27 years ago, 3 years after he married your wife, according to family records. Cresta never drilled, never extracted, just waited. Waited for what? Marcus shrugged. Nobody knows, but they paid $50,000 in 1995 for permanent mineral rights. Your grandfather took the money, kept the land. I sat quietly. 1995, the year Breyer was born, the year an oil company began waiting for Robert's land. Coincidence doesn't last that long. I said, I have a patent, U.S. Attorney Marcus Brennan, a local land specialist of about 55, who had the tired look of a man who had watched companies circle this land for decades, opened the file and said, "Mr. Harrington, your grandfather Robert sold the mineral rights in 1995. He kept surface ownership, but everything underground belongs to Cresta Oil." I asked, 1995 Sue. Marcus nodded. 27 years ago, 3 years after he married your wife, according to family records. Cresta never drilled, never extracted, just waited. Waited for what? Marcus shrugged. Nobody knows, but they paid $50,000 in 1995 for permanent mineral rights. Your grandfather took the money, kept the land. I sat quietly. 1995, the year Breyer was born. The year an oil company began waiting for Robert's land. Coincidence doesn't last that long. I said, I have a patent, US 112345667, smart irrigation from my USAID work in Afghanistan. Could Cresta be interested? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to negotiate? Me, they've held mineral rights for 30 years without using them. I have technology they need for oil drilling. Let's call them. Marcus made the call. 2 hours later, a video call. The laptop screen showed a man of about 50, gray suit, Chicago office. A Cresta company representative. He smiled politely. Mr. Harrington, patent number 112345667, smart irrigation. What's the real value? I said calmly, for a company with 30 years of unused mineral rights, $4.2 million, permanent cross license, until the end of this week. He was silent for 5 seconds. Then, I need to confirm with the CEO. 20 minutes later, he returned. Agreed. $4.2 million. Contract sent by email within the hour. I nodded. Good. He signed electronically. Marcus printed the contract. $4.2 million to be transferred within 3 business days. Before ending the video call, he asked casually, "What is your name?" Me, Thaddeus Harrington, Robert's grandson. 3 seconds of silence. The screen went black. The call disconnected. Marcus looked at me. That was unusual. They just signed for $4.2 million without asking your name first. I stood. They already knew my name. They just didn't think I would be here. The year Breyer was born. The year an oil company began waiting for Robert's land. Coincidence doesn't last that long. 2 weeks later, mid-February 2022, 11:47 at night, someone knocked at the cabin door. I opened it. Cold wind swept in. An old man stood outside, trembling hands, holding a leather-wrapped package. Luther Spencer, 78 years old. Black with the patient eyes and trembling hands of a man who had been keeping a package safe for 12 years, waiting for Robert's grandson, as the prophecy required, stood on the frozen front step. Luther said, "I've been waiting for you 12 years. You're Robert's grandson, aren't you?" I was stunned. Who are you? Luther held out the leather package. Your grandfather asked me to keep this for whichever grandson could live here for 6 months. You've been here 6 weeks, sooner than I expected. I took the leather package, heavy. Old leather, smelling of mold. I asked, when did Robert give this to you? Luther. In 2010, 2 years after your wife died. Robert said, Luther, one day one of my grandsons will come here. Not because he wants to, because he was driven out. Give this to him. I asked, how will I know the right person? Robert, he will live here for 6 months. No one else can. I held the leather package and looked at Luther. Why did you wait 12 years? Luther smiled with exhausted kindness. Robert was the only man in Oak Haven who hired my son as a carpenter in 1998, when nobody else would hire a black man. I owed him, and he was right, you came. How does a 78-year-old black man in rural Georgia keep a package for 12 years, waiting for a stranger he has never met, trusting that person will arrive exactly when the prophecy requires Luther turned to leave, then stopped? You'll need my grandson, a 12-year-old boy named Kai. He understands machinery. He'll find you. Me, Kai. Why would I need a 12-year-old boy? Luther, Robert said so. My grandson will need your grandson. Kai knows how to see what adults miss. I didn't understand it at the time, but Robert was always right. Luther walked down the steps, disappeared into the February fog. I stood on the frozen porch holding the leather package that had waited 12 years for my arrival. Robert knew, in 2010, 2 years after Lorraine died, that one of his grandsons would be sent here, would be abandoned, would need precisely this. The question wasn't whether Robert could see the future. The question was, what else had he left behind? The taillights of Luther's vehicle vanished into the February fog, leaving me on the frozen porch holding a leather package that had waited 12 years. Inside, what Robert knew from 1987 that I was about to discover. My hands were trembling not from cold, but from recognition when I opened Robert's 1987 letter under lamplight at midnight. And the first sentence read, one day this land will be hunted. The oil companies came in 1985, in 1995, but beneath the third well from the north lies a mineral more precious than gold, and only my grandson will be able to see it. Midnight, February 2022, the cabin's dining table, the oil lamp glowing yellow. The leather package Luther had left was now open. Inside, a handwritten letter on yellowed paper. Date in the upper corner, June 12th, 1987. 38 years ago, when I was 21 years old, 3 years before I joined USAID, 16 years before Afghanistan, 5 years before I met Lorraine, 7 years before Sterling was born. Robert wrote this letter when I had no career, no wife, no children. Yet he predicted all of it. I read on. Thaddeus, if you are reading this, it means you have survived living in this cabin for at least 1 month. Good. Oil companies came in 1985 looking for oil. They came back in 1995 to buy mineral rights. They will wait 30 years, but they are looking for the wrong thing. Beneath the third well from the north, not oil. A mineral more precious than gold. Only someone with geological knowledge and irrigation technology will be able to see it. You will go to USAID. You will learn smart irrigation in Afghanistan. You will have a patent. Then you will come back here. Keep this land. Don't sell it. In 2025, they will come back. By then, you will be ready. Your loving grandfather, Robert H. I put the letter down. My hands were still trembling. Robert knew I would go to USAID 16 years before I went. Knew I would have an irrigation patent. Knew I would return to this cabin in 2022. This was not a legal clause. This was a prophecy. I whispered, 1995 was the year Breyer was born. A terrifying coincidence. I folded the letter, set it beside the 1985 photograph. 2 things Robert had left behind. A photograph, a letter, both saying the same thing he had known for a long time. 2 weeks later, in the first week of March 2022, I stopped at the Shell station in Oak Haven. Early spring sunshine. A man in a police uniform walked up and clapped me on the shoulder. 14 years old friend, I knew you'd come back. I turned around, stunned. Floyd Weaver, 60 years old, weathered face in local sheriff's uniform, clapping me on the shoulder at the Shell station after 14 years apart. a former FBI special agent who had once protected USAID food security missions in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2008, now protecting his old friend in rural Georgia. I said, "Wyatt, since when are you the local sheriff?" Floyd grinned. "Since 2014, transferred back after leaving the FBI. I talked to your children. In June 2021, suggested the idea of a quiet rural Georgia location with a grandfather's cabin. They took the bait faster than I expected." I was silent for 5 seconds. Then I smiled faintly. "Do you remember Kabul 2003? The time we saved the wheat harvest for 50,000 farmers?" "Floyd, now we're saving you. Some friendships are forged in Afghan dust and Iraqi bureaucracy, the kind where 14 years of silence means nothing because the trust was welded in survival." Floyd said, "Oil companies have been stalking your land. I've known since 2019. I needed to get you back here to protect you. So I reached out to Sterling, suggested the cabin. Didn't expect them to turn it into a murder plot." "Me? You arranged all of this." "Floyd, Robert asked me to. In 2008, before he died, he said, 'Floyd, one day Thaddeus will need to run, get him back to the cabin, and give him the tools to fight.'" 2 weeks later, mid-March 2022, mourning the front yard of the cabin, Floyd arrived in a pickup truck carrying a wooden crate. He set the crate down. Inside, 4 border collie puppies, 8 weeks old, brown eyes clear as glass. Floyd said, 4 puppies, 8 weeks old, Quantico trained, collar-mounted microphone plus GPS, recording range 30 meters, AES 256 encrypted phone application, download Silas Ops 2022. I looked down, the lead puppy female licked my hand. I asked, "What's her name?" "Floyd." "You name them? They're your dogs now." I scratched the lead puppy's head. Bay. In Vietnamese it means little one, or baby. Lorraine used to say bay when calling her family's dogs. Puppy collar, 30 meters range, AES 256 encryption. The enemy would never suspect a witness that wagged its tail. Floyd said, "They are your surveillance system. Nobody suspects dogs." I opened the phone application, downloaded Silas Ops 2022, logged in with the password Floyd provided. The screen read, 4 devices connected, GPS active, microphone on standby. Floyd clapped me on the shoulder. "In 4 months, those collars will record a conspiracy that thinks it's hunting you." He drove off, leaving 4 weapons disguised as companions. I sat down on the front lawn. 4 puppies ran around me. Bay, the lead dog named for the Vietnamese word Lorraine used for mother figures, licked my hand with soft brown eyes that concealed a Quantico-trained surveillance system. I opened the application. Silas Ops 2022, 4 devices connected. 4 months from now, these collars would record a conspiracy that believed it was hunting me. And by the end of April 2022, a 12-year-old black boy named Kai would break into my barn for the 3rd time, steal a screwdriver, and I would hand him a full toolkit instead of calling the police fulfilling Luther's prophecy, "You will need my grandson." Late April 2022. A full moon. At 11:34 at night, my flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the barn and stopped on a 12-year-old black boy gripping a Phillips head screwdriver, the 4th break-in. But the first time, I had caught him. Kai Spencer, a 12-year-old black boy with quick hands and dark skin, bright in the moonlight of the barn, gripped the stolen screwdriver with the determination of someone trying to fix what poverty had broken. I said, "Stand still, don't run." Kai trembled, clutching the screwdriver. I didn't mean to." I stepped forward, flashlight on his face. 12 years old, black, eyes fearful but resolute, screwdriver held like a weapon. I said, "The 3 times before you took pliers, a hammer, and a wrench. This time, you're taking a screwdriver. What are you fixing?" Kai was silent. "Me sim, the old water pump at your house, right, a 1973 pump. You need a size 2 Phillips screwdriver to open the motor casing." Kai nodded slowly. "How did you know me?" "Because the 3 times before I let you take things. I was waiting for you. An old man told me in February. My 12-year-old grandson named Kai understands machinery. He'll find you. You're 6 weeks late." I went to the tool cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a brand new tool kit. Craftsman brand. 84 pieces. Retail price $340. I handed it to Kai. You need better tools than that if you're going to fix an old pump. That screwdriver is garbage. Kai stared at the toolkit, mouth open. Why didn't you call the police? Me? Because I knew you would come from the day the old man said, the 12-year-old boy named Kai understands machinery. You're 6 weeks late, but you came. Some thefts are an investment. A 12-year-old boy stealing a screwdriver to fix what is broken is a self-announced prophet arriving 6 weeks behind schedule. 6 weeks later, early June 2022, the barn workshop, the 1973 water pump. Kai came every day from 4 in the afternoon until 8 in the evening. He learned to repair agricultural machinery, no pay. But after 6 months, he would earn real money. One afternoon, a knock at the door. I opened it. 2 people stood outside. Marcus Spencer Kai's foster father, about 45 years old, with calloused hands and worn work shoes, holding his hat anxiously as he apologized for his son's barn break-ins. Diane Spencer, Kai's foster mother, early 40s with tired eyes that had seen too many mortgage payment notices, stood beside her husband holding a paper towel. Marcus said, "Mr. Harrington, he broke in 3 times. I apologize. I'll pay for any damages." I shook my head. No payment needed. He'll do an unpaid internship 4 hours every day. He'll learn to repair agricultural machinery. In 6 months, he'll earn real money to help the family pay off the $35,000 debt. Diane cried, "Thank you. We're about to lose the house." Me? Kai has talent. Talent shouldn't be wasted because of mortgage debt. Marcus? What can he do? I pointed to the 1973 pump on the workbench. He'll learn to fix things like this. After 6 months, he'll know more than most local mechanics. Then he'll earn money. Marcus and Diane nodded, thanked me, and left. Kai stayed. He looked at the 1973 pump. I said, "Take it apart." Kai, "No manual?" Meager, stunned, "No, look, remember, take it apart." Kai picked up the screwdriver, began dismantling. 47 components, no manual. Photographic mechanical memory at age 12. This wasn't Luther's grandson. This was my own true grandson. I just didn't know it yet. 30 minutes later, the pump lay in 47 pieces on the workbench, each piece arranged in order, no mistakes. I asked, "You remember all of it?" Kai nodded. "Yes, parts 1 through 47. I can reassemble them." Me do it. Kai reassembled it. 25 minutes. No manual, no questions. Every piece in the right place. The pump was complete. I flipped the switch. The pump ran. A steady hum. Kai smiled. After Marcus and Diane left, Kai sat on the wooden chair, looked at me, and asked quietly, "Do you have a wife and children?" The question hung in the barn air like smoke. 4 seconds of silence. The first time I had said this aloud since January. The first time the betrayal had a witness. I said slowly, "My wife passed away in 2018. My 2 children are in the city. They don't care about this old man anymore." Kai nodded, understanding more than a 12-year-old should. Then he turned back and began disassembling the pump again. I stood still watching him work. Lorraine died in 2018. Sterling and Breyer sent me here to die. But this 12-year-old boy, Kai Spencer, was sitting in my barn, fixing machinery, asking about my family. And I had just told him the truth. My children didn't care about me. In July, there would be a BMW 7-4. OI bringing a real estate attorney named Graham Riddle offering $1.2 million for a luxury eco-resort and threatening mysterious fires if I refused. But today I only stood in the barn watching a 12-year-old boy reassemble a 1973 water pump into 47 pieces without a manual. And for the first time in 4 months, I felt something other than alone. 2 months after Kai's question, the BMW 7-4. Oh, I arrived on a Thursday afternoon in July 2022, 6 months after my exile to Oak Haven began, and the man who stepped out was wearing a Brooks Brothers suit worth more than Kai's family's mortgage debt, which meant he had not come to help. Graham Riddle, 45 years old, a corporate real estate attorney in a Brooks Brothers suit and Italian leather shoes, stepped out of the BMW 7-4. OI with the practiced smile of a man who had threatened elderly landowners 100 times before. He walked up the cabin's wooden porch, handed me a business card. "Mr. Harrington, I'm Graham Riddle. I represent a wealthy Atlanta family. They want to build a luxury eco-resort. They like your land. $1.2 million. Cash. Next week." I smiled faintly. I only just got here. I'm still planting trees, thank you. Graham looked around. You should reconsider. This area isn't safe. Night robberies, mysterious fires, an old man alone. Me. I have 4 dogs. You should go. Graham looked at the 4 border collies lying under the shade of a tree. Bay, the lead dog, watched him with clear brown eyes. Graham nodded. All right. But think about the offer. I'll come back next week. He turned, headed toward the BMW. I stood still on the porch. The 4 dogs lay quiet. Their collars GPS plus microphone 30-meter range, AES 256 encryption were recording everything. Graham opened the car door. Before getting in, he took out his phone and made a call, his voice low. Report back to Boss Townsend that Harrington hasn't moved out. We need to press harder. 30 meters, AES 256 encryption. 4 dogs wagging their tails while their collars recorded a criminal threat. Graham Riddle didn't know he had just confessed before 4 FBI witnesses. The BMW 7-4. OI drove away. Dust rose in its wake. I opened my phone application, Silas Ops 2022. Pressed play. Graham's voice unmistakable. Report back to Boss Townsend that Harrington hasn't moved out. We need to press harder. Boss Townsend. I saved the file, sent it to Floyd via Signal. That evening, cabin kitchen, Iowa ribeye steak, and Maker's Mark bourbon. Floyd sat across from me, listening to the 3-minute 47-second audio file. Graham's voice, this area isn't safe, night robberies, mysterious fires, an old man alone. Then the lower voice, report back to Boss Townsend that Harrington hasn't moved out. Floyd put down his bourbon glass face, gone pale. Townsend. Could that be Mark, Townsend CEO of Cresta Oil? I was stunned. You know that name. Floyd, Mark Townsend, Texas oil baron, net worth $4.8 billion, shale gas tycoon. FBI has been monitoring him for 8 years. I said slowly, Mark Townsend, my college friend from the Wharton MBA program in 1990. I haven't seen him in 30 years. Floyd looked at me. You're serious? Mark Townsend is your college friend? I nodded. We were in the same Wharton study group, 1990 to 1992. Mark, me, and 3 others. We studied corporate finance. Mark was very sharp. After graduating, he went to Texas for oil. I went to USAID. We lost touch. How does a Wharton college friend from 1990, before Lorraine, before USAID, before Sterling and Breyer, become a $4.8 billion oil baron, hunting my grandfather's land 30 years later? Floyd took a sip of bourbon. Mark Townsend owns Cresta Oil, the company that bought your grandfather's mineral rights in 1995. FBI has been watching for suspected shale gas price manipulation and bribing Texas officials. But we never had enough evidence. Me, 1995, 27 years ago. Mark bought the mineral rights when I didn't even know this land existed. Floyd, and now he sends Graham Riddle to threaten you. Mysterious fires, night robberies, that's arson threat. Me, oh, why does Mark want this land? He's had mineral rights for 27 years. Why now? Floyd was silent. Then, do you know that Townsend was a friend of Lewis? I froze. The bourbon glass stopped halfway to my mouth. Lewis was my college nickname. Only 3 people knew it, Lorraine, the Wharton study group, and Mark Townsend in 1990. Floyd nodded. Mark called you Lewis. Me, yes, from 1990 to 1992. Only the Wharton group. After graduating, nobody called me Lewis anymore. Only Lorraine sometimes when she was angry. Floyd, if Mark knows you're in Oak Haven, if Mark sends Graham Riddle, if Mark owns Cresta Oil with 27 years of mineral rights, then this isn't corporate greed. This is personal. I put down the bourbon glass, looked into Floyd's eyes. Mark Townsend, my Wharton friend from 30 years ago, now CEO of Cresta Oil, $4.8 billion, bought mineral rights to my grandfather's land in 1995, sends Graham Riddle to threaten arson in July 2022. Floyd, and you haven't spoken to Mark in 30 years, so why is he hunting you? Floyd's question hung in the bourbon-scented air. Do you know that Townsend was a friend of Lewis? I froze glass halfway to my mouth because Lewis was a nickname that only 3 people had ever used: Lorraine, the Wharton study group, and Mark Townsend himself in 1990. If Mark knew I was in Oak Haven, if Mark sent Graham Riddle, if Mark owned Cresta Oil with 27 years of mineral rights, then this was not corporate greed. This was personal. In September 2022, a veterinarian named Simone Kendrick would treat the lead dog, Bay, after her foot got caught in a poacher's bear trap, and her hands would tremble when she saw my name on the pet insurance card. September 2022, 9:47 in the morning. Bay's rear left leg was caught in a poacher's bear trap near the stream behind the barn. Her cry tore through the cold air, sharp as a knife cut to the heart. I ran outside without time to put on a jacket, my breath turning white in the -1 degree air. Bay lay in frightening stillness, her brown eyes looking at me with absolute trust. Bright red blood spread across white frost like a cruel ink, painting the iron smell mingling with pine resin. I knelt down, hands trembling as I opened the trap, while the other 3 dogs whimpered. "Hold on, Bay," I whispered, voice catching as I felt the fractured bone beneath the wet, blood-soaked fur. I carried Bay into the cabin, laid her on the long wooden table. My phone called the only veterinary clinic within 20 miles, Oak Haven Veterinary Clinic. A woman's voice answered, "Oak Haven Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Simone Kendrick speaking." Soft but firm. I explained the situation. She said, "I'll be right there. What's the cabin address?" 17 minutes later, a green Subaru Outback parked in the front yard. Simone Kendrick, 52 years old, a widow since 2019, a veterinarian with short silver-white hair and gray eyes with amber flecks. She wore a mud-stained dark brown Carhartt jacket and carried a heavy black bag. When she walked in and saw Bay, her face froze, not because of the wound, but because of the black FBI K9 collar with its micro antenna. "Where did you get this dog?" Her voice wavered slightly as she opened her bag for the morphine syringe. "From an old FBI friend," I said. Simone bit her lip hands, trembling, not from lack of experience, but from emotion. "I used to volunteer with the FBI K9 program in 1997 at Quantico, Virginia." Simone said quietly as she trimmed the fur around the wound, the smell of alcohol antiseptic spreading through the air. "I cared for injured service dogs." She looked at me. "Who are you that you have an FBI K9 dog in 2022? I measured my words. "I'm in a complicated situation with my children. They are trying to seize my assets. These dogs are protection." Simone did not seem surprised. She nodded as though she had heard this before, hands expertly splinting the fractured bone with a small aluminum splint. I knew Lorraine. We studied at the same veterinary school in 1995 at UC Davis, California. She specialized in large animals. I specialized in small animals. We shared a dissection laboratory. She swallowed with difficulty. In 1997, Lorraine told me about a man named Thaddeus. She said he would need protection one day, that his children would betray him. The world tilted around me. Lorraine knew in 1997, 25 years before Sterling and Breyer acted, I could smell Bay's blood, the alcohol, the burning pine wood, all blending into a wave of dizziness. What else did she say? My voice was hoarse. Simone bandaged the wound with precise movements, tears shining in her eyes. She said if I ever met you, I should help you, that you were the only man she ever truly loved. Simone looked up. In 2003, I moved to Oak Haven because my husband was transferred. But now I wonder, did Lorraine arrange that? Simone stood, wiped her hands. I'll come back tomorrow to change Bay's bandage. The way she looked at me was not how a veterinarian looks at a client. It was how a woman looks at a man she has been waiting for 22 years without knowing why. I felt a strange connection, like an electric spark jumping between two conductors. Does the cabin have a landline? I shook my head. She wrote her phone number on a yellow notepad page, her handwriting slanting to the right, like Lorraine's writing in the 1986 diary I had found in Robert's box. When Simone was getting ready to leave, she stopped at the door, turned back with an expression of pain. Lorraine told me she studied accounting at Arizona State, but if we studied veterinary medicine together in 1995 at UC Davis, then she lied to you. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing in the cabin with Bay sleeping soundly, 42 questions exploding in my head like fireworks. I watched the Subaru disappear behind the snow-frosted pine trees, a cold thought creeping down my spine. If Lorraine lied about her major, what else had she lied about? And why did she send Simone here to wait for me for 22 years, knowing she would die before I arrived in Oak Haven? I knelt beside Bay, stroking the soft border collie fur, and for the first time since finding Power of Attorney on Sterling's iPad, I felt an emotion other than rage and fear. I felt the loss of a woman I had never truly known. For 15 months after Simone left the cabin, I did not ask her about Lorraine's major. Every week she came to change Bay's bandages every time she looked at me as though waiting for a question I was not ready to ask. Part of me feared the answer. The other part knew Lorraine had lied for a reason, and that reason had to do with me being in Oak Haven rather than lying in a casket. January 2024. 2 years after arriving in Oak Haven, I sat in the town's only coffee shop reading a print edition of the New York Times. Page A7, Aging Bod, a 2,400-word article, The Forgotten Valley That Came Back. 12 color photographs, one of them showing me standing beside the solar-powered water pump Kai had installed. Author Vivica Diaz. The smell of espresso blended with printer's ink, the sound of the entry bell as customers came and went, and my chest tightened when I read that name. Vivica Diaz. 35 years old, a reporter who had called 3 times, who had sent a photographer from Atlanta to take 12 photos. NYT. How'd you end up in there? Luther Spencer's voice sounded in my ear. The old man stood beside me, reading over my shoulder with a curious smile. I don't know, I said. I never met her. She called 3 times, asked about the cooperative, sent someone from Atlanta to take photos. I looked at the small print, 4.3 million online reads in 48 hours. Luther whistled. 4.3 million people now know about Oak Haven. You're famous. But I wasn't listening to Luther. I was staring at the name Vivica Diaz. Why did that name make my chest ache as if someone were squeezing my heart? I closed my eyes, and an image flashed. Kabul, 1990. A brown-haired woman named Lila Hartwell, a freelance journalist for the Washington Post. Bright blue eyes and a smile I could not forget across 35 years. We had 1 month, only one brief month, before she returned to the United States. Vivica Diaz. I whispered, tasting the bitterness of the coffee on my tongue. Lila Hartwell, 35 years. Luther placed his hand on my shoulder, his expression softening. There are reasons why certain names make your heart ache. Remember that. The old man walked away, leaving me with the trembling newspaper in my hand and the question I dared not think. What year was Vivica born? If Lila became pregnant after I left Kabul, March 2024, 2 months after the NYT article, 247 farming households from 7 villages signed the founding documents for the cooperative LLC in the church hall. The smell of old incense mingled with damp oak wood. Afternoon light through stained glass cast red and blue patches on the wooden floor. A non-profit attorney from Charlottesville explained a $14 million valuation, the land to be permanently transferred to the Audubon Conservation Trust within 6 months, never to be sold to a large corporation. I stood before the 247 farmers, feeling 247 pairs of eyes on me, and spoke in both English and Vietnamese. My farm is only one part of 247. The land belongs to the community. The Audubon Trust holds it permanently. It will not be sold to any company. Marcus Spencer. Kai's father stood up from the third row, voice trembling. Mr. Harrington, 6 months ago, my family almost lost everything. Today I'm a shareholder. Thank you. The sound of applause rolled like ocean waves. I swallowed hard, tears stinging behind my eyes. After the signing ceremony, while farmers celebrated with bread and cheap wine, an elderly man approached. Pastor Winston Sinclair, 70 years old, in an old ivory-white liturgical robe, stained with time, gentle eyes that had kept Lorraine's secret for 6 years, walking with the careful steps of a man carrying a prophecy not yet delivered. Silas, he called me by my alias. I have something I need to give you, but I must wait. Lorraine gave instructions. My heart stopped. Lorraine. My wife gave something to the pastor. Pastor Winston shook his head, his expression both sad and firm. When Eleanor tells you, she will know when. He paused, looking at me as though he could see into my soul. She will know when you are ready. Eleanor! I repeated, voice hoarse. And suddenly everything snapped together like a final puzzle piece. Eleanor was Simone Kendrick's first name. I had seen it on a prescription the previous month. Dr. Eleanor Simone Kendrick D. VM. Pastor Winston walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of the hall with 247 farmers celebrating around me, and one devastating recognition: Eleanor was Simone Kendrick's first name. Lorraine had sent a widowed veterinarian to Oak Haven in 2018, 4 years, before I arrived with instructions to wait to watch and to tell the pastor when the time was right. The sealed letter was not only waiting for me, it was waiting for Simone to decide I was ready. For 2 months after the meeting with Pastor Winston, I did not see Simone to ask when she would allow the pastor to deliver the letter. Part of me feared the answer would be, not yet. The other part understood that some truths need time to prepare before they can be received. May 2024. I went down to the cabin basement to find extra blankets for the coming winter and pulled out an old wooden trunk that Lorraine had sent up here in 2018, 6 years before she died, 3 weeks before the cancer finally took her. My fingers touched the false bottom of a drawer, and my heart seemed to stop when I found 2 sealed envelopes in Lorraine's handwriting: Sterling age 5, 1999, and Breyer age 3, 2001. Inside each envelope was a lock of child's hair, and a truth I had suspected for 30 years, but had never dared to confirm. I sat down on the cold basement floor, the smell of damp old wood and the dust of time surrounding me. My hands were trembling as they held the small note card written in blue ink: the truth about J&E, don't open unless necessary. I love you more than you know. M. The letter M, Marguerite Lorraine's first name that only family used. J&E, not Sterling and Breyer, who were J&E. I read it again, feeling the fragile paper in my hands, and a cold thought crept down my spine Lorraine had known. 25 years earlier, when she cut Sterling's hair at 5 and Breyer's at 3, she had suspected or known they were not my biological children. She had prepared DNA evidence, sealed it, and waited. I did not open the 2 envelopes. I placed them in the safe in the bedroom, photographed the note card, then wrote in my journal with a trembling hand, "Today is May 2024. I found 2 envelopes containing hair from Sterling and Breyer. I have suspected this for 30 years. Lorraine also suspected, or Lorraine already knew. I am not ready to open them." I looked up at the photo of Lorraine on the wall. She was smiling in a photo taken in 1998 at the Grand Canyon, and whispered, "Lorraine, what did you know? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you leave me to discover this myself 6 years after you died?" No answer, only the sound of wind through the basement window gap, making a moaning sound like whispers from the past. Mid-May 2024. I drove to the Chicago accounting office of my late father's estate, a 6-hour trip I had postponed for 3 years. Harold Finch, 62 years old, a semi-retired accountant with reading glasses on a chain, pushed the 2010 trust document across the oak desk with the careful reverence of a man who had been watching Robert's prophecy for 40 years. The office smelled of old coffee and paperwork. Afternoon sun through the window made dust motes float in the air. "Mr. Harrington," Harold said in his deep, warm voice, "you have been living in Oak Haven for 28 months. The trust fund has been legally unlocked. $80 million is ready for disbursement." I looked at the document, my hands trembling as I read the key unlock condition. Disbursement occurs only when the primary heir has lived greater than or equal to 6 months at a fixed rural address and has previously worked for a U.S. government agency. I read it again, feeling the world around me tilt. When was this clause written? My voice was hoarse. "In 1985, Harold replied, looking at me through his glasses. "Your grandfather Robert wrote this clause 39 years ago, 16 years before I joined USAID. I whispered, tasting the bitter coffee Harold had brewed for me on my tongue. 7 years before Sterling was born in 1994. Robert already knew. He knew I would work for USAID, knew I would live in the countryside, knew Sterling and Breyer would need me to stay there 6 months to unlock this fund. I looked at Harold with bewilderment. "This isn't a clause, it's a prophecy." Harold nodded slowly. "Robert told me in 1985 that you would understand one day. He said, 'My grandson will need this fund when the family falls apart. Keep it safe.'" I walked out of the office in a dazed state, sat in the Range Rover in the Chicago parking lot, the blaring of car horns on the streets outside, the 2 hair envelopes in the glove compartment, $80 million that my grandfather had engineered in 1985 to activate at precisely the moment Sterling and Breyer needed it most. The conspiracy was not only about land or oil or money. It was about a family that Robert had foreseen falling apart 40 years before the first thread was pulled loose. I opened my encrypted signal phone, typed 6 words to Floyd. "This battle is bigger than I thought." Floyd replied to my signal message 12 minutes later. "Ready when you need me." 4 months later, I understood why Robert had seen the family falling apart 40 years in advance. Some prophecies require no magic, only an understanding of human nature. The dogs barked frantically at 6 in the morning in September 2024. I knew immediately something was wrong. The 2 remaining dogs leapt onto the bed, muzzles wet. The phone vibrated, an unknown number. I answered and heard a sweet voice after 3.5 years of silence. "I missed you, Dad." Breyer. The last time she called was February 2021, 3.5 years ago, 6 months after I arrived in Oak Haven. Her voice was like honey. "Sterling has been thinking about Dad. We both want to come visit, just family. We miss the mountains." I stood on the cabin porch, pine smoke curling from the chimney frost. On the September grass, 3 dogs around my feet whimpering. I checked the calendar, September 2024. Exactly 4 months after the $80 million fund was unlocked in May. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice warm as a father remembering his children. "Anytime." I hung up, opened my notebook and wrote in Vietnamese, "The cat is coming. Open the trap." 1 week later, a rented SUV parked in the front yard. 4 people stepped out in falsely simple country clothing, Sterling in unwashed Patagonia, flannel Breyer in Salomon hiking shoes, still bearing price tags, Saskia in a cream cashmere sweater, Dane wearing Persol sunglasses in the shade of the pine forest. Their smiles were as stiff as wax figures. I hugged each of them, feeling their bodies rigid under my arms, like cocked spring traps waiting to be triggered. I cooked venison soup with coriander and juniper berries, the fragrance spreading through the cabin. The leather sofa groaned as Sterling sat down, his weight 102 kilograms, according to the medical records I had once seen in 2018, making the spring's protest. Afternoon, September light slanted through the pine frame windows, casting yellow patches on the floor. I served the soup in pottery bowls, watching the 4 of them exchange looks, a language I had spent 28 months in Oak Haven learning to read. "This place is so charming, Dad," Saskia said, eyes drifting toward my office door. "Can I use the bathroom?" I pointed her down the hall, watching her stand with an air of excessive naturalness. I had installed motion sensors from May through August. I knew they were hunting. "How's Dad's health?" Sterling asked, his voice gentle. "Mom mentioned Dad had some trouble walking." I took a sip of soup, tasting the rich venison on my tongue, and smiled. Getting old, son. Everything weakens. The Saskia was missing for 3 minutes and 47 seconds in my office. I knew because I counted. Bella's collar fitted with a microphone after I discovered the DNA envelopes in August recorded everything at 48 kilohertz clarity. The muted but audible sound of an iPhone shutter, the rustle of paper, 23 pages being photographed. And Saskia's whisper into her phone, "Mark, everything's here. The 2022 contract. The meeting minutes too. Sending now. Mark." So there was one more person involved. Robert's old attorney had retired in 2019. This was someone new. I sat on the leather sofa, listening to the sound of Saskia moving through my office via the Bluetooth earpiece in my left ear, a device connected directly to Bella's collar microphone. The scent of her Ralph Lauren perfume, identical to Lorraine's, drifted through the air in the closed office. Saskia returned to the dinner table with a look of slight relief, sat down and ate her soup, as though nothing had happened. I watched her, thinking, "You think you're the hunter, but you're the prey." Dinner ended at 7:43 in the evening. I saw the face of Sterling's Patek Philippe watch catch the light under the propane lamp. Venison fat had congealed on the pottery bowls. I had turned off the main lights to create a warm atmosphere, but really it was to see their faces clearly in the dimness. The propane lamp hissed and sputtered, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Sterling set down his fork, looked at me with the expression of a fake concerned doctor. "Dad about the trouble walking. Mom mentioned Dad hasn't been going to checkups. We're worried." Dane nodded. Saskia held her phone under the table. Breyer smiled, the same smile I had once seen on Lorraine's face in 1984, the first time she lied to me about where she spent an afternoon. I understood immediately they were building a medical incompetency file. They were building a case to challenge my control of the estate. That night I lay in bed listening to the recording from Bella's collar, hearing Saskia's voice whispering to Mark about the 2022 contracts. They were not building a medical incompetency file. They were preparing something larger. Sterling opened his leather case at 7 in the morning, placed 10 white pages on the breakfast table, his voice smooth as a doctor's. Dad, we prepared this to help you. I sat down, the smell of cold coffee mingling with pine smoke from the fireplace. Venison sausage on the plate still warm. Sterling turned to the first page. It's just a standard medical POA, Dad, so if you fall or need hospitalization, we can authorize treatment without delay. Saskia added with a sweet smile. A mobile notary is in town today. We could finish this morning, saves Dad from having to drive to Billings. I looked at the first page, standard medical boilerplate language, familiar clauses about healthcare decisions, CPR, mechanical ventilation. I nodded slowly, running my fingers over the paper, smooth surface, slightly glossy, different from regular paper. Let me read carefully tonight, I said. I'll sign in the morning. Sterling's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. A micro-movement only someone who had lived with another person for 28 years would notice. Dad's overthinking this, Saskia said. It's just healthcare boilerplate. Dad, you're a lawyer, you know these things. I smiled, took a sip of bitter coffee. Old lawyers rule, never sign the same day. Sleep on every signature. Tomorrow morning, 9 sharp, I'll sign. Sterling looked at Saskia, a microsecond disappointed headshake 15 degrees to the left, lips tight. Good, he said. Tomorrow morning. They left the document file on the table, like bait in a steel trap. That afternoon they went walking around the town. Breyer photographed mountains. Dane bought souvenirs. Sterling and Saskia sat at the cafe watching me through the window. I stayed in the cabin reading the 10 pages for the 5th time, searching for anything unusual. Nothing. The language was perfect. Too perfect. Pages 1 through 6. Standard medical POA. Pages 7 through 9, mandatory Montana state disclosures. Page 10, signature line. I waited until 11 at night when all 4 were asleep in the 2 guest bedrooms. I locked the office door, took out the UV flashlight purchased in August 2024 after discovering the DNA envelopes, the same shopping trip when I bought Bella's orthopedic collar. Before I show you what that UV light revealed on page 7, are you still with me? Comment A if you think it was standard boilerplate, or B if you suspected a hidden clause. Add your reason in 5 to 10 words, so I can see how you're reading this. Note, the following section contains details reconstructed for emotional impact. The lesson is what I hope stays with you. I switched on the UV light and swept it across page 1. Nothing. Pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, nothing. Page 7. The paper blazed fluorescent blue. My heart stopped. In the center of the page in UV, reactive ink, invisible under normal light, was clause 47.3. The grantor hereby transfers all United States patent number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 100%. Equity in the Harrington family, co-op, and trust management rights of $80 million to the grantee in perpetuity, effective upon signature. I read it again, feeling the smooth paper under my fingers. The UV reactive coating gave it a slightly different texture. All patents, co-op equity, trust rights, in perpetuity, I whispered in Vietnamese. So they want everything. Not a conservatorship, which would require a hearing medical evaluation, a judge time. This was legal robbery. If Sterling signed my name, I lost everything in 1 second. I picked up my macro lens, photographed clause 47.3 at high resolution, 24 megapixels, every letter, clear under UV light. Uploaded to an encrypted RAR file sent to the Dropbox subfolder, Counteroffensive Dash, September 2024. Open Signal. Typed a message to Floyd Mercer, my Montana attorney since 2019, 58 years old. Former public prosecutor, specializing in real estate fraud and elder abuse, clause 47.3, POA is complete robbery. I have evidence. Floyd replied 40 seconds later, 11:24 p.m. Void it tomorrow morning. Don't sign. I'll have the cease and desist drafted by 6 a.m. I type back, begin counteroffensive. Floyd's second message arrived at 11:24, C and D drafted. But Thaddeus Clause 47.3 matches language from a 1987 Montana precedent, Roberts versus Estate. Someone researched this 40 years deep. I looked at Sterling's name on page 10, a sample signature in blue ink. But the actual signature line was filled with a different pen, heavier strokes, angled 12 degrees to the right. Not Sterling's handwriting. I knew who had drafted Clause 47.3 before the DNA came back. The signature on page 10 was not Sterling's. The angle was 12 degrees to the right, the pen strokes heavier. But the morning after, I refused to sign the POA when I saw Dane's face in the sunlight. I understood who was orchestrating everything. Morning light on Dane's face, square jaw, deep-set eyes. I froze. I had seen this face 40 years ago in a Chicago law office when Quentin Ashford signed the $4.2 million oil contract. Dane sat at the kitchen table, reading the New York Times coffee cup, in hand the eastern window light, bringing out the exact jaw profile as Quentin in 1984. I calculated Dane was born around 1990, precisely during the peak period of the Quentin-Lorraine relationship. "Dad is staring," Breyer said, concerned. "Is something wrong?" I smiled, took a sip of now cold black coffee, bitter on the tongue. "Just thinking about how much Dane resembles an old colleague. Is that square jaw hereditary in your family?" Dane looked up from the paper gray eyes like Quentin's. "Not really. My father had a round face. Maybe I take after my mother's side." I thought, or after Quentin. Sterling and Saskia were silent throughout breakfast. The POA had been refused the night before. They knew I had found Clause 47.3. The tension was as taut as stretched wire. Dane drained his espresso cup, set it on the granite kitchen counter with a clink of ceramic, and the four prepared to leave. "Thank you for having us, Dad," Breyer said, a strained smile. "We'll be in touch soon." I hugged her, feeling her body stiff as stone. They got into the rented SUV and drove off in a cloud of dust. I waited 20 minutes, went to the kitchen, looked at the espresso cup still on the counter. The coffee grounds smell still lingered in the air. I took a Ziploc bag carefully sealed. The cup wrote a label in black marker, Sample D-092024. Open Signal typed a message to Floyd. Need DNA comparison. Subject Dane Castillo versus archived sample Quentin Ashford hair from 1985 from Lorraine's Range Rover. Rush processing. Floyd replied 5 minutes later. Sending kit to your P.O. box. ETA 2 days. What's the theory? I typed back that my daughter married the son of her mother's lover, and none of them know it. The sound of the Ziploc sealing hissing in the silent kitchen. I held the cold ceramic cup in my hand, feeling the weight of the evidence. 2 months later, November 2024, I accessed the Bloomberg terminal through the co-op's CFO login. The screen glowed blue in the dark office, the pine wood fire creating a warm pine smell. The headline appeared on the front page, Thornton Miller PE Fund collapses $40 million loss in Q, 3CRE scandal. I clicked on it. The list of partners appeared. Sterling Harrington, MD, physician, senior partner since 2018. The bankruptcy concealed by NDA, not public. I read on, partners liable for $8 to $12 million each. Sterling Harrington's risk exposure, $11.7 million personal guarantee. I read aloud, partners liable $8 to $12 million each. Sterling must carry $11.7 million personal guarantee. I thought, so that's why my son needs the POA. Steal the father's assets to pay the son's debts. For Quentin. I clicked the cap table tab, the capitalization table. Silent limited investors list. Third line, Quentin Ashford. 38% equity silent, LP, silent limited partner from 2015. I cross-referenced Thornton Miller PE, founded in 2015. Quentin Ashford on the cap table as silent LP with 38%. Sterling joined in 2018 as a junior partner. Dane Castillo married Breyer in 2019, the same year Quentin's equity rose to 38%. Dane's company, a subsidiary of Thornton Miller. Quentin had staged everything bankrupt. The son married the daughter to his own planted man, deployed the POA through desperate Sterling. I looked at Lorraine's photo on the desk. She was smiling in the frame from 1992 at Yellowstone. I touched the smooth glass of the frame, whispered in Vietnamese, "Our son is bankrupt. Our daughter married a man Quentin installed. Everyone is being manipulated." I set the photo frame down, a gentle tap on the wooden desk. Continued whispering, "Our son is desperate, Lorraine. Quentin turned him into a chess piece." The email from Family Tree DNA arrived 3 weeks after I sent Sample D, just as I opened Bloomberg for the third time to check Thornton Miller. Subject, paternity test results confidential. I opened it, probability of paternity 99.97%. Subject D, Dane Castillo shares 23 chromosomal markers with archive subject Q Quentin Ashford, 1985. Dane was Quentin's son. Breyer had married her maternal half-brother, and Quentin had arranged this since 2015, 9 years before they accidentally met at the Columbia Med School mixer. I knew Dane was Quentin's son. Now I needed to know how much of the past 3 years had been real and how much was a script Quentin had written. The private investigator pushed the transfer record across the desk, $200,000 Saskia Prescott to Vernon Yates, dated August 15th, 2021, memo, consultation fee. And I stopped breathing. My terminal illness had been purchased. Keith Graham, the PI Floyd had hired in November of 2024, a former FBI white-collar crime specialist, tapped a finger on the yellow highlighted row on the smooth transferred document. Yates gave a statement after 48 hours. Keith said, his voice flat as a man who had heard too many confessions. Said Saskia threatened to report him for a 2019 medical malpractice unless he diagnosed you as terminally ill. So, I was never actually dying. I said, my voice hoarse. The sterile smell of the independent Atlanta clinic spread through the cold air. 3 years my children believed I had only months left. All of it was theater. Keith nodded. Dr. Worth will run independent tests today, but this bank record has already proven fraud. He pushed another file, Yates' statement secured via court subpoena. I diagnosed Mr. Harrington with early-stage Alzheimer's and pancreatic cancer at Mrs. Prescott's direction in order to justify removing him from his position managing the cooperative. I took a sip of black coffee in the clinic, waiting room institutional, and bitter as cold and clinical as the truth I had just received. 4 hours later, Dr. Helena Worth, independent physician, board-certified neurologist and oncologist, who conducted impartial medical evaluations for legal proceedings, called me into her office. She placed 3 files on the desk: blood work, MRI, cognitive assessment. Mr. Harrington, she said, looking at me through her reading glasses, your cognitive score is at the 96th percentile for your age group. No pathology. Whoever diagnosed you as terminally ill either lied or was incompetent. He was paid $200,000 to lie, I replied. I have the wire transfer receipt. Dr. Worth looked at me with a cold fury, the fury of a physician watching her profession defiled. Then you have grounds for fraud, medical malpractice, and elder abuse. I will certify these findings for the court. She turned over the MRI images, a clean brain, no signs of degeneration, no Alzheimer's biomarkers, no cancer cells, no neurodegeneration, only finding 2021 pneumonia antibodies fully resolved. Yeah, mid-December. I went to the village church in Oak Haven. Pastor Winston Sinclair, 70 years old, who had served this church for 40 years, stood waiting for me at the front door with an envelope in his hand. Red wax seal. Address in Lorraine's handwriting, to Thaddeus when he's ready. The smell of old wood and candle wax in the church. The organ sounding a low C note at the back. Your wife came here 6 years ago, Winston said, handing me the envelope. The red wax cracked slightly when I took it, heavier than I expected, thicker than a single page. She said you would come one day, and I would know when to give this to you. She died in 2018, I said. How did she know I would come to this village in 2022? Winston smiled sadly. She said, he will run when the cage closes. He will find the only place I prepared for him. She understood you, Mr. Harrington. Simone stepped out from the church's back room, the scent of lavender as always, but her face carrying a concern I had never seen before. I need to tell you something, she said gently. I was Lorraine's friend from 1995. We studied at the same veterinary school at UC Davis. I witnessed the Quentin relationship firsthand. I saw Quentin visit. I saw her cry afterward. My heart seemed to stop. So you were staged. For 4 years, our friendship, all of it, was Lorraine's plan. Simone shook her head. The location was her plan. The friendship was real. She swallowed with difficulty. Lorraine came to visit me in 2018 when she was about to die after her diagnosis. She asked, "Move to Oak Haven in 2020. Wait for Thaddeus. He's going to need someone who knows the truth and won't judge him." I moved in. 2018, waited 4 years, became friends with you in 2022, all at Lorraine's arrangement. She knew I would need to run, I whispered, looking at the sealed wax envelope in my hand. She knew you would need someone who already knew the worst thing and would still stay. Simone said, her voice trembling. She said, "He will think he's alone. Show him he isn't." I held the red sealed letter heavier than I expected, thicker than a single-page address in Lorraine's handwriting, to Thaddeus when he's ready. I didn't open it, not yet. I went back to the cabin, opened the safe, and placed it beside the 2 DNA envelopes and the copy of Clause 47.3. 40 years of marriage and her last letter still unread. Lorraine's letter lay in the safe unopened for 1 month. Each night I looked at it. Each night I decided I wasn't ready. Part of me feared what she had written. The other part knew that once read there was no going back. Bay's collar microphone picked up a whispered conversation at 11 at night. From a bar 400 meters to the south, a man's voice. "Burn the Northeast barn dump chemicals in Tate Creek. Miller will have to sell at $800,000. I sat in the cabin office at 11:58 at night on January 12th, 2025, staring at the phone application showing the audio waveform from Bay's collar microphone installed in September to monitor Family Now accidentally catching a third party's plot. 48 kilohertz quality. The bar's background noise, clinking beer glasses knocking, but the voices as clear as though they were sitting next to me. Everett, Monday night. A man's voice whispered, "I recognize Graham Riddle, the local real estate developer, with 3 fraud convictions from 2015 to 2019, conspiring with Everett Hewitt about an arson-for-profit scheme funded by Townsend Development. Northeast Barn, 2 a.m. Gasoline plus phosphorus. Tate Creek gets the discharge at dawn." The second voice, Everett Hewitt, convicted arsonist in 2018, released 2022, recruited by Graham Riddle for the barn burning and stream contamination scheme, replied, "Miller will sell within 48 hours. Townsend confirmed $250,000 transfer on Friday if we deliver." I took a sip of black coffee brewed at 3 in the morning, while reviewing the audio bitterness on the tongue, the metallic taste of adrenaline when hearing an arson conspiracy play out. Bay had walked past that bar at 11:47 at night. The microphone caught everything. They had no idea. I sent the encrypted audio file to Floyd Weaver at 3 in the morning. The smell of pine smoke in the cabin office mingled with the coffee I'd brewed. The phone screen was cold under my fingers as I scrolled the audio timeline. Floyd replied 17 minutes later. Signal ping at 3:17 a.m. Graham Riddle, Everett Hewitt, both already flagged. "I'm calling the FBI in 6 hours. I type back, "Townsend, who is that? The one paying $250,000. Wand, oil desastawaivis. Floyd Townsend Development, LLC. Subsidiary of, Thornton Miller, P.E. Sterling's bankrupt fund." I stopped breathing. Sterling wasn't just bankrupt. He was operating a local extortion network. Quentin wasn't just playing revenge. He was building a criminal empire. At 9 a.m. on January 13th, Floyd reported to the FBI Atlanta office federal charges, interstate conspiracy, environmental terrorism for the stream contamination threatening a federally protected watershed. 1 week later, January 20th, 2025, I sat in the Oak Haven Sheriff's Office with Floyd. The computer screen displayed a video call with Dr. Raymond Kolb, senior USGS geologist, specializing in Marcellus Shale formation, confirming Robert's 1987 prophecy about the third well from the north, being worth $300 million in reserves. His voice had a slight delay, the echo of a video call arranged through the FBI. I placed Robert's 1987 letter on the desk, yellowed paper with fountain pen handwriting, the smell of old paper and oxidized ink. The third well from the North survey, coordinates from 1987. Dr. Kolb said through the screen, pointing to overlaid USGS geological maps. Marcellus Shale extension. Conservative estimate $300 million. Your grandfather was a prophet. Floyd turned documents. The Cresta Family Trust filed mineral extraction rights in 1987. Robert Cresta listed as trust administrator. He knew before fracking was invented. Robert waited 30 years for the world to catch up to the technology. I said in English, then switched to Vietnamese. Quentin waited 30 years for revenge. 2 men, 2 strategies. That night I opened the cold safe, took out Robert's 1987 letter, the page edges brittle, crumbling slightly at the touch. I read the full text aloud for the first time in years. The third well from the North will make our family richer than oil ever could. Robert knows. He is waiting for the world to catch up to the geology. Trust him on this one thing even if you disagree with him on others. I looked at the line, Robert knows. He is waiting for the world to catch up. He knew from 1987, waited 38 years. I thought grandfather trusted Robert about geology, warned me about everything else. He knew Robert was a patient predator, not the reckless type like Quentin. I whispered to the letter, $300 million. You saw this before I turned 30 years old. I opened my computer and compared the 1987 survey map with the 2025 USGS map. The third well from the North was present in 1987, but had vanished from all public records after 1992. A signal message from Floyd arrived at 11:34 at night. Robert refiled the mineral extraction rights in 1992 under a shell company, Northwell Limited, Cayman Islands. The third well exists, but he hid it from public records 33 years ago. The third well was still there. Robert had hidden it. Floyd hired a forensic cartographer to find the third well's coordinates. But before the results came back, he gave me something else. Something that proved Saskia was not my daughter-in-law, but a hired gun. Floyd pressed play. Saskia's voice from the microphone in the boardroom, Teddy Bear in Chicago, rang out. I wrote this script 4 years ago after Skadden fired me in 2022. Quentin is paying $5 million. Sterling is just an actor. I sat in the cabin office in early February 2025, 2 weeks after discovering the shale gas, staring at the small teddy bear device on Floyd's desk. Floyd's phone vibrated as it played the audio. Saskia's voice crackled with contempt. Skadden fired me in March 2022 for $180,000 in billing fraud. Saskia's voice continued from the boardroom recording. An NDA buried it. I needed revenge and money. Quentin provided both. I took a sip of cold black coffee, bitter on the tongue. Sterling's voice weak in the background. Saskia, did you plan all this before we discussed Dad's assets? Saskia laughed a laugh as cold as a razor. Sterling, you're bankrupt and desperate. I'm a disbarred attorney with a plan. We aren't partners. You're my instrument. Her voice continued clear and ruthless. I found Graham through LinkedIn. I wrote Clause 47.3. Quentin gives $2.5 million when the POA is signed, the rest when Thaddeus commits the conservation rights. Floyd turned off the audio, looked at me. Sterling thought he was leading, but Saskia was in control from the start. I nodded slowly, feeling cold anger spread. She's not family. She's a hired gun. Floyd pushed another file across the desk. The internal Skadden record, Saskia Prescott terminated for cause ethics violation, 3.4b restitution, $180,000. No prosecution per agreement. He pointed to the timeline. March 2022, fired June 2022, Quentin agreement, September 2024, POA attempt, 4 years of premeditated planning. She lost her career, so she planned to steal mine, I said, and used my bankrupt son as her weapon. 1 week later, mid-February 2025, at 2:47 in the morning, Everett Hewitt burned the northeast barn, the original plot Graham had laid out in January. I woke to the sound of Bay barking in the fire. My phone vibrated a collision alert from Bay's collar transmitter. I ran outside, saw the orange flames blazing in the darkness of 2:47 in the morning heat radiating from 50 feet away. Kai Spencer Simone's 15-year-old nephew, an Oak Haven resident and volunteer firefighter, was running into the flames. I shouted, "Kai, don't!" but he had already disappeared into the smoke. 30 seconds later, he came running back out, holding Bay his shoulder, on fire, second-degree burns, skin blistering. The sweet smell of burning flesh like medicine mixed with the acrid smoke of dry hay and chemicals, the scent of burned grass and burning chemicals. I arrived within 4 minutes, saw Everett standing 20 meters away, a gasoline can in his hand. The gasoline smell on him was clear even through the smoke. I raised my phone. The FBI has your audio from January 12th. Graham has already been arrested. You're going to federal prison for $250,000. Everett dropped the gasoline can. Voice panicked. Townsend said this was just a property dispute. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Kai has second-degree burns, I said coldly. You just injured a 15-year-old boy. The sound of a pickup truck from a distance, Derek Spencer Kai's father, 43 years old, a local rancher near Oak Haven, drawn to the fire from his neighboring property. He jumped out, ran to Kai. Son! Then he looked at Everett and froze. His face recognized Everett's profile after 28 years. Derek's voice trembled. Marcus Caldwell. I gave my child up for sealed adoption in June 1998. I was 16 years old. His mother was 15. You are my biological son. Everett froze, the gasoline can clanging to the ground. Derek continued, tears rolling down his cheeks. I named you Marcus after my grandfather, born April 1997. I've been looking for you 28 years. Kai sat on the ground, holding Bay, his burned shoulder raw to the touch. When the medic reached him and looked at Everett, Are you my brother? Derek stepped 3 meters closer to Everett, voice breaking. I am Kai's father. You are half-brothers. Everett stared at Derek, mouth dry, with the shock of Derek saying, Marcus, the birth name his adoptive parents said the records had been destroyed for. Everett stood, frozen hands still smelling of gasoline, looking at Derek Spencer, the biological father he had never known, standing 3 meters away. Kai sat on the ground, second-degree burns on his shoulder, holding Bay, looking at Everett. Are you my brother? The sound of the sheriff's siren from 800 meters away. Everett had 90 seconds to run or to meet his father for the first time in 28 years as a convicted arsonist. Everett did not run. He knelt down, placed his hands on the ground, and waited for the sheriff to come. Derek stood beside his son, the son he had been searching for 28 years, while police cuffed Everett. 4 hours later, the sheriff released Everett into Derek's custody. $50,000 bail posted. Derek pushed the sealed 1998 adoption papers across the kitchen table at 4:30 in the morning, his voice hoarse. Your name is Marcus Caldwell. My grandmother forced me to sign when I was 16. I've been looking for you 28 years. I sat at the kitchen table in Derek's house near Oak Haven, the smell of coffee brewed at 4:30 in the morning, filling the air. Everett stared at the document, yellowed paper brittle edges. I held you for 90 minutes before they took you away. Derek said, voice breaking on the word Marcus. I named you Marcus after my grandfather. Your mother wanted the Caldwell surname. We were still children. Tears ran down his face. Evangelical family, my grandmother forced the adoption to preserve the family reputation. I was 16. Your mother was 15. Everett looked at the document, voice trembling. My adoptive parents said my birth parents were dead. 28 years of lies. Derek nodded. I tried to unseal the records when I was 18, 21, 25, 30. The courts refused every petition. He looked at Everett, and tonight you appeared burning a barn. I looked at the two of them, father and son, reunited after 28 years at a crime scene. Crime is not born from nothing. It is born from desperation and abandonment. At 5 in the morning, Floyd arrived with an offer from FBI Atlanta. FBI wants Quentin Ashford. You're the small fish. Graham is the medium fish. Saskia is the big fish. Quentin is the bank. Give us the bank, get 2 years instead of 25. Everett looked at Floyd, tears streaming. I became this because nobody wanted me. Now my biological father shows up, and I'm a federal arsonist. I'll testify. He accepted, providing evidence, emails, payment records, Saskia's arson instructions, details of Quentin's $5 million wire transfers. 25 years reduced to 2. He agreed to wear a wire. I thought Quentin created broken weapons. Everett, Sterling, Saskia, all the desperate people he bought. 1 week later, mid-February 2025, I sat in the cabin office. The smell of pine smoke, Lorraine's red sealed letter lay on the desk, received from Pastor Winston in December, unread until now. I broke the seal with my thumbnail, the wax crumbling rough. Date, June 2018, 3 weeks before Lorraine passed. Simone stood behind me, a hand placed on my shoulder. Winston sat in the chair beside me. I opened the first page, a faint lavender scent, Lorraine's signature fragrance still present after 7 years. I read aloud, "Thaddeus, I betrayed you from 1993 to 1998 with Quentin. 5 years. Some of our children carry his blood, not yours." My mouth went dry as I read the infidelity confession. J/E may not be your blood. I saved hair samples from them in June 1999, sealed in the Range Rover's glove compartment box. Simone squeezed my shoulder gently. She wanted you to know the truth when you were strong enough to weaponize it. Winston said, "She gave me this letter in June 2018, 3 weeks before going to the hospice. She said, he'll need this when the war begins." She knew. I turned to the next page, Lorraine's handwriting, more unsteady. Written in hospice, I saved hair samples of J/E in June 1999, 1 year after the relationship ended. Placed the sealed envelopes in the Range Rover's glove compartment box. When Robert or Quentin comes for revenge, you will need evidence of which children are weapons installed in our family. The hair will show you. I planned your escape 26 years ago. I stopped breathing. The DNA envelopes from May 2024. Sterling and Breyer, aged 5 and 3, were not an accident. They were Lorraine's deliberate evidence. 26 years of preparation. Simone set the coffee cup down gently on the desk. She spent 26 years preparing your victory in a war she knew was coming. That is love, Thaddeus. I read on, "The hair will show you which child is a weapon. I planned your escape. I love you more than you know, even after betraying you." I whispered to Lorraine's photo on the desk, the glass frame cold against my lips. "You prepared this truth for 26 years, from 1999, before I even knew there was a war." I turned to the final page. Lorraine's handwriting changed, more unsteady. Written in hospice, "P.S. Thaddeus. Robert Cresta knew about the relationship from 1994. He kept the secret not to protect me, but to control you. He has photographs. He has recordings from December 1995. He has been waiting 30 years to use them. Find safety deposit box 447. First National Bank Chicago key is in the 1987 grandfather letter envelope. The metallic taste of adrenaline on my tongue as I discovered Robert had known for 31 years. I would retrieve the key for box 447 later. First, I needed to know the truth about the 2 children I had raised for 30 years. 1 week after reading Lorraine's letter, Floyd took me to an independent DNA lab in Atlanta with Sterling and Breyer's 2 hair envelopes. The DNA analyst pushed the results across the desk, 99.97%, probability of paternity. Sterling Harrington and Breyer Harrington were both the biological children of Quentin Ashford, not mine. Dr. Sarah Cross, a forensic DNA specialist at the independent Atlanta lab with 15 years of experience in paternity and kinship analysis. A court-certified expert witness in over 40 states pushed the 47-page report across the desk. The printer hummed. The glossy paper was cold under my fingers. "Mr. Harrington," Dr. Cross said, pointing to the comparison chart with 23 chromosomal markers highlighted in red matching Quentin. 23 chromosomal markers matching Quentin Ashford for both samples. Statistically, he is the biological father. You share no unique markers. She paused. Probability that you are the biological father, 0.03%. Probability of Quentin Ashford, 99.97%. I looked at the number 0.03%. 31 years raising Sterling, 29 years raising Breyer. Every birthday, every graduation, every sick night, built on a biology I didn't know was false. The smell of the Atlanta lab antiseptic and printer ink spread through the air. I took a sip of black coffee bitter as I reviewed the DNA results. I raised Sterling for 31 years. I said, my voice flat. Breyer for 29. Every birthday, every graduation, built on a biology I didn't know was false. Floyd sighed, looking at the 99.97% probability. Fatherhood is in blood, Thaddeus. You chose them every day for 30 years. Quentin only provided the DNA. Sterling was born in 1994, the first year of the relationship. Breyer born in 1996, the third year. Every moment, first steps, college applications, medical school. I was a biological father, by choice, not biology. Sterling and Breyer didn't know Quentin was their biological father. Quentin weaponized his own biological children against the man who had truly raised them. 15 minutes later, in the conference room of the same lab, I processed the revelation. My hands trembled slightly, holding Breyer's 2001 hair envelope. Sterling was 2 months old when I held him for the first time, I said to Floyd. I didn't see Quentin's DNA. I saw my son. Floyd nodded. And that's what matters. Quentin created them biologically. You created them as human beings. I thought in Vietnamese, Quentin used his own 2 biological children to attack the man who truly raised them for 30 years. That is a monster. That same week in the cabin office in Montana, 3 days after the DNA results, Keith Graham pushed another file across the desk. A marriage of convenience contract dated May 2020. The smell of pine smoke in the office as I processed Breyer's betrayal. The coffee in my cup had gone cold in 3 hours of reviewing evidence. A Dane Caldwell, Keith said, pointing to the real name, not Castillo. Former Marine Iraq, 2004 to 2008, dishonorably discharged in 2008 for financial fraud. Not a Columbia Arts curator. Quentin paid $5 million over 5 years, $1 million per year, to marry Breyer and surveil. Floyd opened the second file. The DNA test you ordered in September was blocked. Quentin sent a falsified result to make you believe Breyer had married her maternal half-sibling. Psychological torture. I could taste the metallic adrenaline on my tongue as I realized the full extent of Breyer's marriage. So Dane is not Quentin's son. He was just a hired gun. Ann Breyer knew nothing. Keith nodded, closing the folder with a finality on Dane's contract. $5 million contract over 5 years to marry Breyer Harrington, monitor her movements, file quarterly reports, expiring May 2025, 3 months away. No blood relationship to Quentin, purely hired surveillance. Keith presented the timeline. November 2019, Columbia Mixer, Quentin funded $50,000, received the attendee list, sent Dane with a gallery curator backstory, specifically targeting Breyer. The contract was smooth with its notary embossed seal under my fingers. May 2020 marriage contract begins. 5 years of total theatrical surveillance. Breyer has no idea her husband is a paid operative. Floyd checked the calendar. May 2025 contract expiry 3 months away. Dane will disappear. Quentin gets $5 million worth of intelligence and leaves Breyer with the trauma of a fake marriage. I whispered, poor Breyer. Quentin turned her wedding into a 5-year fraud 5 years ago. The poor girl doesn't know her own biological father bought her a fake husband for $5 million. Keith opened the final file. My mouth went dry when I discovered the Scarlet Clause. Dane's contract has termination clause 8.7, if. Breyer discovers his identity before May 2025. Quentin activates protocol. Scarlett Dane receives a $2 million bonus to publicly humiliate her via a press conference revealing family secrets, then disappear. Floyd checked the calendar. March 1st in 4 days. Contract ends May 15th. We have 74 days before Dane disappears or destroys her. I did not tell Breyer about Dane. Instead, I planned a public celebration, a place where both Sterling and Breyer would understand they had lost everything 9 months earlier, and where the whole world would know why. I stepped up to the wooden stage at noon on December 5th. 2025, 200 farmers seated in folding chairs, 12 reporters holding cameras, and Sterling was driving a U-Haul into the village square with cardboard boxes, thinking today was the day he would claim his inheritance. The banner on the stage read, Oak Haven Cooperative LLC Celebration, December 5th, 2025. Montana's December air was crisp at noon, pine garlands decorating the stage. I held the microphone metal cold in December. This farm has belonged to Oak Haven Cooperative LLC since March 2024. I said into the microphone, feedback ringing. 21 months ago, 7 villages, 247 shareholders, valuation $72 million as of November 2025. I paused, looking at the crowd. The land is protected permanently by the Audubon Trust Conservation Restriction. It cannot be sold to a corporation or seized through inheritance. Vivica Diaz, chairman of the board of Oakhaven Cooperative LLC, 52 years old, organic farmer representing 247 shareholders across 7 villages elected unanimously in November 2024, stood from the front row. 247 shareholders across 7 villages. We are the owners now. This land will never belong to a corporation. Floyd stood beside the stage. Audubon Trust Conservation Restriction, filed November 2024. Permanent, irrevocable, protected forever. At 12:15, the U-Haul truck entered the village square, Sterling driving Briar in the passenger seat, Saskia and Dane in the back. Cardboard boxes visible through the rear window labeled Kitchen, Master Bedroom. They expected to move into the family farm today to seize the final inheritance after 4 years of planning. Then they saw 200 people reporters, the ceremonial stage. Sterling braked hard on the gravel, a sharp scraping sound. He stared. Briar from inside the truck. Sterling, why are there 200 people? Why are there reporters? Sterling reading the banner, Oakhaven Cooperative LLC Celebration. December 5th, 2025. Oh my God. Saskia from the back seat. That's impossible. The farm is Harrington family property. Quentin confirmed the 2023 contract. Sterling got out of the truck, ran to the stage shouting, "That's family property. You had no right to give it away." 200 farmers turned. Reporters aimed cameras, red recording lights blinking. I spoke calmly into the microphone. I transferred it 21 months ago. This is community property, not family property. Briar followed, crying, "We're your children, Dad. You're giving our inheritance to strangers." The sound of her sobbing amplified as she climbed the stage steps. I looked at her microphone, still on 200 witnesses. "You tried to steal it with a forged POA, a $200,000 bribe diagnosis, and arson. I protected it from thieves." Sterling climbed the steps, shouting, "Dad, that land is worth $72 million. You're giving it to 247 strangers instead of your own children." My mouth went dry as I spoke the biological truth publicly. "You are not my children. DNA testing in February 2025 confirmed Sterling and Briar. You are the biological children of Quentin Ashford. I raised you for 30 years. You repaid me with conspiracy. Do not call me father anymore." The metallic adrenaline taste on my tongue. Sterling's face drained of color as he heard biological children of Quentin Ashford, the first time he had heard the biological truth publicly spoken. His knees trembled on the stage steps. Briar sobbed, "Dad, you're saying this in front of reporters, in front of the public." I turned away from Sterling, and Briar spoke to the 200 farmers into the microphone. "My real family is not blood, it is choice. Simone, Kendrick, Kai, Spencer, Luther, Spencer, Winston, Sinclair, Vivica, Diaz, Floyd, Weaver. 247 shareholders, you are my family. You stood with me when my blood relatives tried to rob me. Luther Spencer Kai's brother, 24 years old, a local cattleman, a cooperative shareholder, since March 2024, representing 3 generations of Spencer family roots in Oakhaven, stood and started clapping. 200 people followed. I stepped down from the stage, rough pine wood under my boots, walking past the collapsed Sterling on the steps and the sobbing Briar, not looking back. I joined Simone. She took my hand, warmed the scent of her lavender fragrance. Reporters filmed everything, cameras clicking continuously. Floyd handed me a coffee cup from a thermos, bitter. I whispered in Vietnamese, only Simone hearing, "My real family is not blood, it is choice." Sterling stood up from the wooden stage steps, face white, turning to Saskia, standing by the U-Haul. He said, "Quentin is our biological father. You knew, didn't you?" Saskia was silent for 5 seconds. Reporter cameras zooming in on her face. Then Saskia laughed coldly. "Of course I knew. Quentin told me in 2022. Why do you think he paid me $5 million? I sold out my own biological father for a man who's actually your father." Reporters swarmed Saskia as she confessed to knowing Quentin was Sterling and Briar's biological father since 2022. But I was done caring about Saskia. I needed to finish this. I held the DNA envelope, looked at 200 spectators, and spoke the name of the man standing at the edge of the square 40 years after meeting him at Wharton. Quentin Ashford, my friend Lorraine's lover, and the biological father of Sterling and Briar. I pointed to the man in a gray suit standing at the periphery, pale frozen. CEO of Cresta Oil, Wharton classmate from 1992. You became my wife's lover for 5 years. You are the father of the 2 children I raised for 30 years. You paid $4.3 million in secret support for 20 years, then $5 million to Saskia to rob me. Quentin at the edge, voice trembling. Thaddeus, I never wanted to. FBI agents stepped toward him. 200 witnesses gasped. Sterling stared at Quentin. You are my biological father, and you used me as a weapon against the man who actually raised me. No answer. FBI handcuffed Saskia, metal glinting in the December sun. At 12:25, Dane stepped toward Briar in front of 200 witnesses and spoke the truth. Briar, I am not your husband. I am a $5 million contract. May 2020 to December 5th, 2025. Today is the day it ends. Quentin paid me $1 million per year to marry you and surveil you. I'm sorry, but this was never real. Briar collapsed. Simone caught her. The salt smell of Briar's tears spreading. Sterling faced Quentin. You paid someone to fake marry my sister, your own biological daughter. Quentin was silent, FBI handcuffing him beside Saskia, the smell of the FBI agent's coffee breath as they made the arrest. At 12:34, Vivica Diaz stood in the crowd, removed her cooperative chairman's name badge. The back of it revealed a press badge, Quinn Hartwell, NYT. My mouth went dry as I said, "Don't call me father anymore." She said, "My real name is Quinn Hartwell, born March 1991 in Kabul, Mother Lila. Hartwell, civil engineer, who died in 2010. Before she died, she told me your father is Thaddeus Harrington. I've been searching for 14 years. Ancestry DNA matched in 2024. I came to Oak Haven as cooperative chairman to watch you fight your fake children while I waited for the right moment. I'm 34 years old. I am your biological daughter." I stepped down from the stage, dazed, and hugged her, the first touch between a father and daughter after 34 years. The scent of Vivica's jasmine fragrance different from Simone's lavender as I held her. The crowd was silent for 8 seconds, then erupted in applause. "Quinn, Lila's daughter, my daughter." My voice broke. 34 years I didn't know you existed. Vivica Quinn opened her arms, her hands warm and firm as I took them. "I'm here now, Dad. I was protecting you as cooperative chairman. I am real. I am blood. I am yours." At 1:02, I handed Sterling and Briar the DNA envelope and Lorraine's letter, the paper rough, in Sterling's trembling hands. Lorraine's letter smooth inside the envelope. "You are not my blood. I have known for 30 years, loved you by choice. You chose betrayal. Do not call me father. I have a real family, Vivica Kai, Simone, Floyd, 247 households. When you apologize for your choices, not for the money, I will listen. Until then, goodbye." Sterling held the envelope, whispering, "Dad, Thaddeus, we're sorry." I turned away my final words. When the apology comes from the heart, not the inheritance, I'll listen. Until then, Vivica Kai Simone, let's go home. I took Vivica's hand on my right, real biological mine, Kai's hand on my left shoulder, firm. Simone beside me. The 4 dogs, Bay plus 3 others, followed, their feet crunching on the gravel as the family walked away. I walked out of the celebration, Sterling and Briar left behind, holding envelopes heading toward a Montana December afternoon and a new life-chosen family moving toward the December sunlight. Behind me, Sterling and Briar stood, frozen, holding DNA envelopes Quentin and Saskia held by FBI Dane, walking to his car alone, 200 witnesses in silence. Montana. December air crisp at 1 in the afternoon. The DNA envelope in Sterling's hand fell to the ground, with a soft sound inside Lorraine's 1999 note visible through the torn corner. "Thaddeus, I am sorry, but you deserve the truth. Love them anyway if you can. L." I did not look back at the falling DNA envelope. Lorraine's note said, "Love them anyway if you can." But I had chosen my real family, Vivica Kai Simone, 247 households. The following month, Vivica would discover more than either of us had imagined. Vivica read the DNA results with trembling hands. 99.98% probability of maternity. Kai Spencer, the boy sitting across from her, was the biological son she had been searching for 13 years since giving him up as a 22-year-old in Georgia. January 5th, 2026, the Atlanta DNA Clinic. The test report was glossy in Vivica's trembling hands, the 99.98% probability highlighted in yellow. Kai, you are my son, Vivica said, her voice breaking. I gave birth to you on March 17th, 2013. I was 22 alone, afraid. I had to let you go. The scent of Vivica's jasmine mingled with the childhood soap smell of Kai. Kai, 12 years old, black hair, hazel eyes like Vivica's. His voice quiet. My parents told me I was adopted when I was 5. They said maybe my birth mother would find me someday. I didn't know it would be you. Derek Spencer, Kai's adoptive father, said, "We have waited 12 years for this moment. We would not fight it. Kai deserves both families, adoptive and biological." Rachel Spencer, Kai's adoptive mother, married to Derek, 15 years, a primary school teacher who had raised Kai from 8 weeks old with unconditional love and openness about his adoption, sat beside him. I realized Kai was my biological grandchild, Vivica, my biological daughter, 3 generations of blood in the same room. Kai asked with a child's voice, but an adult's maturity. "Why did you give me up? Did you think about me?" Vivica cried. "Every single day for 13 years. I named you Quinn Alexander. I held you for 6 hours before they took you away. I've been searching ever since. 22 years old, unmarried, my mother had died. In 2010, I was still looking for my own father. I couldn't raise a child alone. I realized my mouth dry. Kai, you are my biological grandson. Vivica is my daughter. You are my family." Derek and Rachel immediately offered joint custody with no court dispute. Derek said, "Rachel and I always knew this day might come. We will not contest it. Kai deserves both families, adoptive and biological." Rachel said gently, "You gave him life, Vivica. We gave him a childhood. Now we share his future together. That is how families should work." Vivica was overwhelmed. "You're not going to court, just offering joint custody." The proposed arrangement: Kai lives primarily at the Spencer home in Oak Haven. School stability, spending every other weekend and summers, with Vivica holidays shared. Vivica stays in Oak Haven as cooperative chairman to be close to Kai. A blended family without trauma. I realized the first biological family I had known, outside of Lorraine and Sterling/Briar. Vivica, 34 years old. Biological daughter found in 2024. And Kai, 12 years old, biological grandson, found in 2026, created a true 3-generation family. I embraced both Vivica and Kai at once, both arms around them, Vivica's adult frame under my left arm, Kai's 12-year-old shoulder under my right. Derek and Rachel watched, smiling, the DNA results on the table. 69 years I have lived. 30 years I raised children who were not my blood. Now I have a real family, a daughter and a grandson, and it is more than I ever imagined. Kai leaned against me. "Grandpa Thaddeus? Can I call you that?" "I already have, Grandpa Spencer, but you are blood," Vivica cried. "Dad waited 34 years for me. I waited 13 years for Kai. We are all here now. Complete." Kai pulled back slightly. "Grandpa Thaddeus, Mama Vivica, I have something to say. Last week, Derek and Rachel showed me the adoption papers from 2013. There was a part they never mentioned, the part about the biological father. It says father unknown, mother listed as Quinn Alexander Hartwell, single parent." Kai looked at Vivica. "Mama, who is my biological father, do you know?" I stood by the living room window, watching light snow fall as Vivica turned the last page of the yellowed letter. "Ahmad Yusuf," she said, her voice trembling. "He was the Afghan interpreter I met while volunteering in Kabul in 2012. We fell in love in secret because his family wouldn't accept an outsider." Kai sat between Vivica and Rachel Spencer, eyes wide. "In March 2013, the Taliban kidnapped Ahmad because he worked with Westerners. They executed him 1 week before I found out I was pregnant." Vivica held Kay's hand. "But you are the last gift Ahmad left behind." Derek Spencer wiped his eyes. "In Dari, Kai means steadfast. Ahmad wanted you to be strong. I felt the smell of old paper from the letter on the table, another letter from 1997, Lorraine's slanting handwriting. Dear Thaddeus, I read silently. I know you will never forgive me for abandoning Vivica, but you need to know for the past 13 years, I have been sending financial support for the girl through the Children's Future Fund every month. You cannot find Vivica because I hid the trail, but I never stopped caring for my daughter. I'm sorry. Lorraine. That money helped me survive in Kabul, pay for the hospital when Kai was born, Vivica whispered. I never knew who sent it until today. I swallowed a bitter sadness. Lorraine had betrayed me in 1,000 ways, but this quiet act, 13 years of silent support for the secret daughter, showed a fragment of conscience I hadn't thought she still possessed. My phone vibrated. Marcus, federal court verdicts just in. Saskia Harrington, 8 years federal prison. Graham Harrington, 6 years. Everett Chen, 2 years. Quentin declared bankruptcy settled your civil suit for $4.2 million, everything he had left. I closed the phone, feeling a mixture of relief and emptiness. 8 years, 6 years, 2 years. Those numbers weren't enough to compensate for the 4 years I had lost, but they were proof that justice could arrive, even if late. It's over, I said to Vivica and Quinn, who had just walked in with Ezra. Saskia, Graham, and Everett are all going to prison. Quentin is bankrupt. Quinn hugged me. Dad, you won. But as I looked out the window watching snow fall slowly, I knew the real victory wasn't the sentences or the compensation money. It was the 3 generations sitting in this room, me, Vivica, and Kai, the grandson I had just found. January 25th, 2026. The Fairmont Hotel conference room was packed with 200 people, reporters, senior civil rights attorneys, social activists. I stood at the podium, stage lights glaring, the smell of machine-brewed coffee filling the air. Marcus sat in the front row beside Vivica Quinn, Ezra Kai, Derek, and Rachel Spencer. My family not entirely biological, but the family I had chosen and who had chosen me. There are times, I began, my voice amplified through the microphone, when you lose everything to realize what you truly have. There are times when the people you trust most are the greatest betrayers. There are times when justice comes late, but still comes. I paused, looking down at the draft I no longer needed to read. 4 years ago, 3 of my children, Saskia Graham and Quentin Harrington, together with Dr. Everett Chen, fabricated a dementia diagnosis to steal $78 million of my assets through a forged power of attorney. I said clearly. They locked me in a nursing home, gave me unnecessary sedatives, and told the world I had lost my mind. But I had not lost my mind. I had only lost my trust. The sound of typing from reporters filled the air like rain on a tin roof. Today, Saskia sits in federal prison with an 8-year sentence. Graham, 6 years. Everett, 2 years. Quentin bankrupt and forced to settle for $4,200,000, everything he had left. But the money and the sentences are not my victory. I gestured toward the family. The real victory is finding Vivica Quinn, my daughter lost for 30 years, and my grandson Kai, whom I didn't know existed until last week. The real victory is Marcus Cho, an attorney who became a friend. The real victory is knowing that family is not blood, but whoever stands beside you when life collapses. Applause rang out. I saw Kai smiling, his hand gripping Vivica's and Rachel's tightly. Quinn wiped tears. If you are a victim of elder financial abuse, don't give up, I concluded. Justice may come late, but it will come. And sometimes, when you lose everything, you will find what truly matters. An hour later, we stood outside the hotel. Snow fell more heavily, covering shoulders and hair. I breathed in deeply the cold air smelling of fresh snow and wood smoke from the neighboring building. Vivica stood on my left, Quinn on my right. Kai, Derek, Rachel, Ezra, and Marcus formed a circle around me. Grandpa, Kai said the first time he had called me that. Thank you for not giving up on finding Mom. I knelt down to his eye level, a 12-year-old boy's eye level, and placed my hands on his shoulders. Thank you for giving me the chance to be a grandfather. Snow fell. My family stood around me. The wasteland, the old life, with Saskia Graham. Quentin Lorraine had been left behind, buried under snow and time. Ahead was a new future, not perfect, not easy, but real. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt I had come home. And to you who have been listening to my story, remember this. I spent 30 years building wealth, but forgot to build a real relationship with my children. I trusted them blindly, failing to see the warning signs. Don't make my mistake. Don't let money blind you to the true nature of the people around you. Betrayal by family is the deepest pain, but through that family betrayal, I learned that real family is not defined by blood, but by love and loyalty. Saskia Graham and Quentin carried my DNA, but Viveka, Marcus, and Kai are my real family. I believe that God allowed me to go through this trial to find the people who were truly worthy. Losing everything is sometimes the only way to realize what truly matters. If this story touched you, please leave a comment. Have you ever experienced betrayal by family? Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Revenge Dad channel. Thank you for staying to the very last minute. Once again, please note that this story contains some fictional elements to highlight the message, but the lessons about trust, betrayal, and family are entirely real.